I get asked almost every day, George, what's the best place to retire in Thailand? Hua Hin, Pattaya, Chiang Mai, Samui. And after living here, I think most people are asking the wrong question. In fact, I think one of the biggest mistakes people make before moving to Thailand is trying to find the perfect town. Because here's what I've realised. The perfect town probably doesn't exist. Or if it does, it won't stay perfect forever. People spend months, sometimes years, comparing one place with another, trying to work out which is best. But I think they're solving the wrong problem. Because the biggest advantage of retiring in Thailand isn't finding the perfect place. It's realising you don't have to stay in one place forever. So today I'm not going to rank towns or tell you which one wins. Instead, I want to show you why finding a good place to start might be far more important than finding the perfect place to stay. Let's get into it. So why do we all do it? Why do people spend 6 months comparing Hua Hin to Chiang Mai, then Chiang Mai to Phuket, and somehow end up reading about udon thani at 2 o'clock in the morning? I get it. I did exactly the same before I moved here. You join a new Facebook group and ask a simple question. What's the best place to retire in Thailand? Within an hour, you've got 50 different answers. One person swears by Pattaya, the next says they'd never live there. Someone else tells you Hua Hin is the only sensible option. Then another person insists Chiang Mai changed their life. Who's right? Probably all of them. Because you're talking about what suits them, not necessarily what will suit you. Then you start watching YouTube, channels like mine, walking around beaches, showing condos, comparing prices, and everywhere looks pretty good. Well, of course it does. I'm filming on a nice day in one of the better parts of town. That doesn't mean it's automatically the right place for you. Before long, you've got pages of notes, maybe even a spreadsheet. I've genuinely had people send me spreadsheets comparing 8 to 10 different towns, rent, hospitals, expat communities, cost of living. And while all that research can be useful, it's also based on one big assumption, that you have to get your very first choice exactly right. That if you pick the wrong town, you've somehow failed. And that's the idea I want to challenge today. Here's what changed my thinking. A few years ago, I was chatting to a British guy over a coffee in Hua Hin. I asked him how long he'd been living there. He said about 8 months. Then he added, before that I spent 2 years in Pattaya, before that a year in Chiang Mai. My first thought was, he can't make up his mind. But the more we talked, the more I realised I had it completely wrong. He wasn't confused, he wasn't unhappy, he'd simply changed. When he first arrived in Thailand, Chiang Mai was exactly what he wanted. Quiet, relaxed, a complete change of pace after years of working. A year later, he wanted something different. More people, more restaurants, more going on. So Pattaya suited him. Then after a couple of years, Pattaya started to feel a bit too busy. So he moved again. This time to Hua Hin. 3 towns, 3 different stages of his retirement. And suddenly it clicked. None of those moves were mistakes. Each place gave him exactly what he needed at that point in his life. That's when I realised most people don't actually live in one town forever. They only plan to. And I think that's one of the biggest differences between planning a retirement in Thailand and actually living one. This is where I think most people get stuck. They treat their first decision like it's their last one. Let me ask you something. How many times have you moved house during your life? Probably more than once. Maybe you've changed jobs, moved to different areas, downsized when the kids left home, or simply fancied a change. That's just life. Very few of us stay in the same place forever. So why do we suddenly think retirement in Thailand has to be one perfect decision? Why do we put all this pressure on ourselves to get it exactly right before we've even lived here? I understand why. Moving to another country feels like a huge step. There's a different language, different visa rules, a different culture. So the natural reaction is to do more research, watch more videos, read more Facebook posts, compare more towns. But here's the problem. You're trying to work out how you feel living somewhere while sitting on your sofa thousands of miles away. That's almost impossible. Because until you've actually lived somewhere, you simply don't know. And the good news is, you don't have to know. You don't need to find the perfect town. You just need to find a good place to start. And this is the part hardly anybody talks about. One of the biggest advantages of retirement in Thailand is the freedom it gives you. You don't have to get your first decision perfect. You can rent a condo in Hua Hin for 6 months and simply see how it feels. If you love it, stay. If you don't, move. It's really that simple. Compare that with buying a house back home. Solicitors, surveys, contracts, stamp duty, thousands in fees. Once you're abroad, changing your mind can be expensive and stressful. Thailand is different, especially when you're starting out. You can rent a furnished condo, live there for 6 months or a year, get to know the neighbourhood, meet people, settle into a routine, and if, after all that, you think, you know what, this isn't quite for me, then try somewhere else. Nothing says your retirement story has to begin and end in the same town. And that's what takes all the pressure away. You're no longer trying to make the perfect decision. You're simply making a sensible first decision. Because your first town doesn't have to be your forever town. It just has to be a good place to begin. Let me give you a few examples. These aren't specific people, but they're based on conversations I've had over the years. The first one is pretty common. Someone chooses Hua Hin because they want peace and quiet. They love it for a while. But after a year or two, they start thinking, I actually miss having a bit more going on. More restaurants, more nightlife, more choice. So they move to somewhere like Pattaya. Not because Hua Hin was the wrong decision. Because what they wanted has changed. Then you got people who do exactly the opposite. They arrive in Pattaya and absolutely love the energy. There's always something happening. It's easy to meet people. Everything's on your doorstep. But after a couple of years, they start craving quieter mornings, less traffic, a slower pace. So they move to somewhere like Hua Hin or even Chiang Mai. Again, not a mistake, just a different stage of life. And I've spoke to people who couldn't imagine living anywhere else except an island. Koh Samui, Koh Phangan, the beach, the lifestyle, everything they dreamed of. Until one day they realised that easy access to a good hospital has become more important than waking up next to the beach. So they moved to the mainland. None of those people got retirement wrong. They simply discovered something you can only learn by actually living somewhere. Sometimes your first town teaches you what your second town should be. And that's exactly how retirement should work. And there's another reason I always suggest renting first. It's not just about flexibility. It's about what you learn. because living somewhere for 6 months teaches you things that a 2-week holiday can never do. You discover what the town is really like, not just on a sunny Tuesday in high season, but in the quieter months too, when the tourists have gone home, when some restaurants close early, when life settles into its normal rhythm. You also discover what your life looks like there. Maybe you imagined yourself walking along the beach every morning. Then you realise it's a bit further away than you thought. Or it's simply too hot by 10 o'clock in the morning. Maybe you thought you'd eat out every night. Instead, you find yourself enjoying the little cafe around the corner where the staff already know your name. Those are the things that really matter. And then there are the people. Real friendships don't happen in a week or two. They take time. The people you meet during your first month often aren't the people you're still having a coffee with a year later. That's all part of settling in. If you buy a property before you experienced any of that, you're making a permanent decision based on a temporary experience. Now, I'm not saying don't buy. Plenty of people do, and they're very happy. But I'd always rather spend 6 months learning about a place than spending years wishing I'd done exactly that. Then I realised something else, and this one took me a bit longer to understand. Your priorities don't just change from one person to another. They change within the same person. Think about it. Imagine you arrive in Thailand at 60 or 62. What's important then? Good weather, a low cost of living, trying new food, meeting new people, maybe having a bit of adventure after working for years. Now fast forward 10 years. What matters then? Maybe being close to a good hospital. Maybe having an airport nearby because the family visits more often. Maybe quieter streets, better pavements for walking, less traffic, more convenience. None of those changes happened overnight. They crept up on you. And one day you suddenly realise the place that felt absolutely perfect 10 years ago isn't quite as perfect anymore. Not because you chose badly, because you've changed. And that's completely normal. I think that's one of the healthiest ways to look at retirement. You're not choosing the place you'll live forever. You're choosing the place that suits your life right now. And when your life changes, it's perfectly okay for your location to change as well. And this is where I think a lot of people overthink the whole move. They're trying to make one decision that will work for the next 20 years. But why? You don't need to plan for the next 20 years. You only need to plan for the next year or two. Once you've lived here, you'll know far more than you do today. You'll know what you enjoy, what you don't, what you wish you had, and what you could happily live without. That's not a weakness in your plan. That's actually the strength of it. Because retirement isn't something you figure out before you arrive. It's something you figure out while you're living it. The people who seem happiest here aren't usually the ones who planned every detail. They're the ones who stayed flexible, who adjusted, who weren't afraid to say, you know what, this place has been great, but I think it's time for a new chapter. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. So here's the biggest lesson. If you remember just one thing from this video, I hope it's this. Stop looking for the perfect town. Start looking for a good place to begin. They're two completely different things. A good place to begin doesn't have to tick every single box. It doesn't have to be where you'll spend the next 20 years. It just needs to fit your life right now. Somewhere you can afford, somewhere you enjoy waking up to each morning, somewhere that gives you the chance to settle in and discover what really matters to you. Because once you've lived in Thailand for a while, you'll almost certainly see things differently. You'll learn what you love, you'll discover what annoys you, your priorities will change, and that's perfectly normal. In fact, when I think about the people I know who've been the happiest living in Thailand, very few of them are still in the first place they moved to. Their Thailand story has chapters, not just one, and maybe that's the biggest advantage of retiring here. You don't have to get it perfect the first time. You just have to get started. Because retirement isn't one decision you'll live with forever. It's a journey. And the best journeys don't always begin with the perfect destination. They begin with the right first step. So maybe stop asking yourself, where should I retire? Instead, ask yourself, where should I start? I think that's a much easier question to answer. You're not trying to predict the next 20 years of your life from a 2-week scouting trip. You're simply choosing a place that feels right for now. And if, in a few years down the road, your priorities change, you can change too. To me, that's one of the biggest advantages of retiring in Thailand. Not that there's one perfect town, but that you don't have to stay in the first one you choose. If you've already retired here, I'd love to know, did you stay in your first town, or did your Thailand journey take you somewhere completely different? And if you're still planning your move, where do you think you'll start? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching today, guys, and I'll see you on the next one.